This one? No? Just this one. Okay. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I'm going to read, but you'll have to also know that this is really heartfelt. It is my honor to introduce A.D. White Professor at Large Louis Massiah, who is both an esteemed filmmaker and film producer and culture worker, and a beloved member of the many communities in which he works. He is founding director of Scribe Video Center, which provides professional media workshops to professional artists and media makers, as well as novices, activists, organizers, social workers. This is to say, anyone who has a story to tell. Massiah is known for articulating the values of community media, challenging the common beliefs about how films should be made, and organizing community documentary strategies across media practices. He is a well-known filmmaker. I grew up watching some of his films. He has won awards for documentaries such as The Bombing of Osage Avenue, W.B. Du Bois, A Biography in Four Voices, A is for Anarchist, B is for Brown, and the two films he directed for the Eyes on the Prize series. His films have had PBS broadcasts and have been screened around the world. He has received the MacArthur Genius Fellowship, a Pew Fellowship in the Arts, 2 Rockefeller Tribeca fellowships, media fellowships, and his commissions include the President's House site, a 5-channel installation for the U.S. National Park Service, which was permanent from 2010 until it came down due to a federal order this year, and a video installation for the Musée de Civilisation Noire in Dakar. Massiah's concern for the communities he documents extends to his filmmaking practice and to a broader community practice. Massiah created Scribe Video Center in his town of Philadelphia as a way to give people working at all levels and at all ages access to skills and a place to exchange ideas about filmmaking. The Media Center serves individual, independent media makers, complete novices, and community groups, as I said, and it not only organizes 52 workshops annually, but also commissions media artworks by established artists and funds works by emerging artists. In the process of building and running Scribe, Massiah has developed pedagogy and media production methodologies that help people who have never made a documentary build one in collaboration with others. Scribe-produced projects include the Precious Places Community History Project, the Muslim Voices of Philadelphia Community History Project, The Great Migration, A City Transformed, and the tenets of Lenape-Hukking in the Age of Magnets. Massiah directs the center with brilliance, thoughtfulness, and an impressive ease with people from all walks of life. He has a profoundly innovative, interdisciplinary approach to culture work. The opportunity to host him here at Cornell is an opportunity to highlight this interdisciplinarity in a unique way. When he was an undergraduate here, he studied astronomy and physics as well as narrative. He went on to make films in a variety of different ways, and the work that he did among all these subjects directly led to his path of making documentaries. He describes this path in his master's thesis from MIT, Event and Idea, a writer's approach to the videotape documentary, and I'm going to read just a little bit of that. Growing up in the 1960s, in an age where a greater understanding of the physical nature of matter had helped create a technologically oriented society, my first interest was in trying to understand fundamental physical processes. As a student, I was intrigued by those elegant laws of physics and matter, which seemed to give great order and harmony to an otherwise unmanageable world. When I later came across the writings of diverse theorists, the cosmologies of Thomas Gold and John Wheeler, Ilya Prigoghine's dissipative structures, there was again a feeling of delight. My impulse was to find a medium in which these ideas and others like them might be presented to a larger audience, particularly people who might not have access to the writings from which these ideas came. The search for this medium and approach, tempered by the qualification that my job was not only to express profound and elegant concepts, but concepts that were in fact true, led me to consider the videotape documentary. He goes on to describe the perception of videotape as having not just an air of objectivity, but also a sensation of cognition, a feeling that the viewer is there in the scene. In that early writing, he contends with the power of that effect for the viewer, with what it means to be able to bring the viewer into community with people on screen. This interest has grown into the broad understanding that he has and the manifestation of community media projects that he makes today. In recent years, I saw him give a talk, and I wrote this down and carried it with me, and I don't even have where this came from anymore. But he talked about his work as an independent media maker and culture worker, leading him to the following guiding questions. How do we make a more just society? How do we use culture as a way to take us to the next level? How do we see cultural practice as being fundamentally an emancipatory practice, a carrying on with the Underground Railroad? How do we see it as a way of taking the entire society forward? It seems to me that these are the fundamental questions that we ought to be asking, not just in the arts, but across the university and beyond. This way of framing the relevance of media practices and the importance of community empowerment permeates everything Massiah does. In the times that I've had the opportunity to work in Philadelphia, where he works and lives and is from, I've had a number of people come up to me when they know that I'm working with him, but also when they know that that's happened in the past, and just say, I will do anything Massiah asked me to do. And the first couple of times that Keith and I had that experience, I remember saying, like, this is really an interesting effect. And then the next time we came back to Philadelphia, we realized that we were also these kind of people. And what I learned from that experience is this. It's not that he's an elder. It's not that, not just that what he asks you to do is correct, but it's also that it's something really special to be a part of the work that he does, and that you really want to make it proliferate. That there's a joy in participating in the culture that he creates, not just out there with the films, but in the very making of the work. And so Massiah has been hosted by lots of universities, Swarthmore, MIT. It is only fitting that we have the opportunity to welcome him back home to his alma mater. So please join me in welcoming Louis Massiah.
Anyway, thanks so much. All right. Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much, Mindy. Very, very generous introduction. And yeah, I do feel like an elder. You know, there's no two ways about it at this point. This is it really was a great honor to be here, and I want to thank Mendy and Keith Obadike for hosting, making this happen, and sort of creating the path to be here. And it's also really important to me to really come back to Ithaca. I was going to say Cornell, but I really mean Ithaca, because in a lot of ways, I really feel that the land and the space are part of the impact of this place, and the history of the land is part of what has guided me, and part of what has guided Cornell and guided all of us that are in the room. I've really treasured the ability to have informal conversations with students and faculty and staff and residents of Ithaca while here, and that's part of the gift of being here. I guess undergirding, I'm going to try not to read, so I'm going to try to do this by memory. So definitely undergirding, I think this occasion is thinking like, okay, how can we, I know this is like a it's being called a keynote speech, but in many ways, I hope it is a conversation, a discussion, that we're in dialogue. But I think, to me, what's here is we are in this moment of peril, and that's so real. I mean, if one, reads, 2 days ago, social media that we're threatening to bomb a people back to the Stone Age, absolutely outrageous, absolutely outrageous. We really need to think about what we're doing like each day in terms of how do we build for the future? How do we build for change? How do we build for not just this generation, but really learning from the land that we're in and the people that inhabit the land, to really think about how do we plan for 7 generations, and really think about that, when you get up, when I get up, I'm talking to myself, what are we going to do? And also really, I'm trying to frame my discussion about media making, and media making that is that has some really specific goals in terms of how is this work related to the larger enterprise that I hope we as a community, we as a species should be involved in. I mean, we should be involved in trying to make things better. So that's the lens that I really want to think about. What I'm trying to do, and I think all of us. I assume from what I know what folks are doing, and I know. I definitely know people in this room. I know, Anne, I know Jennifer, and I know Mendy, and I'm meeting people. I know that you are involved in transformative work, and not to lose track of that, because it's so easy, because there's so many demands and so many distractions. It's so easy to really just do the next thing that we're sort of being pressured to do. So I came into media making, and really I want to talk quite specifically about the work that I do at Scribe Video Center, and I really should say the work that we do at Scribe Video Center. I came to that work not as a livelihood. I came to it because it seemed and seems like important and necessary work that it wasn't necessarily about remuneration for me. That said, I understand the need for remuneration, and I know that I've been very fortunate to be able to make films, and which I also have put responsibility on the films that I make. But I've been able to do I've been able to make a living without necessarily making Scribe Video Center my living. Scribe Video Center is a media arts center. It's a place where people come together to sort of share, to share skills, to gain access to equipment, and to help each other realize their dreams and their visions. people take workshops to realize, personal visions, and also we work we often work with groups of people, groups from community groups and community organizations that use time-based media, use video, also use audio as ways of looking at issues, looking at histories, and also again to imagine and to more than imagine, maybe even create roadmaps as to how best to go into the future. Scribe began in 1982, really as an after-work and weekend kind of gathering space. We were housed in a place called Brandywine Workshop, which is a print atelier that had extra space, and sort of were there for the first 4 or 5 years of our existence, sort of rent-free and just meeting and workshops became the mode of production. So we would have a camera and lighting workshop or a video technology workshop, and it really was through those workshops that people were able to make work and complete the projects that they wanted to work on. But from the beginning, Scribe was predominantly people of color. I'm African American. The first paid person on staff was a Japanese American artist who actually had been interned during the Second World War, and that whole experience had so politicized her. And but she actually was the mother of somebody I went to high school with, and sort of kind of helped run the administration side of things. And it was proudly had a strong African American presence, in terms of other people that work with me at Scribe, but definitely always was quite intentionally open to people that had a vision of a personal vision, but really a vision of trying to see what this society can be. But it soon became really clear that the people at Scribe were college educated, they'd come to Scribe because of some kind of access that they already had. And it became really clear that most working class and poor people do not give themselves the permission to create. They'll say kids can do it. They'll say, well, let's do it for the kids. But they don't really give themselves permission to engage in cultural production. And so really thinking like how to make sure, how do we, how can that happen? Because nobody's getting paid. We're doing these workshops, and it's a lot of labor going into the work. So we really wanted to make sure that the fruits of that labor really were being broadly shared. Around that time, an extraordinary writer, cultural worker, had moved to Philadelphia, Tony Cade Bambara, who some of you may know. Actually, there's a film about Tony Cade Bambara, which I hope you'll come see on Friday, this Friday at Willard Straight. Tony, began at Scribe really with script writing and really helping people plan documentaries, but also had a very, very, very strong understanding about the importance of cultural work. she actually had first taken a filmmaking class at that time was a very, very small little museum called the Studio Museum of Harlem. And also there's a very famous filmmaker that was in our class, a woman named Julie Dash. So if any filmmakers are in the house, imagine that class that was taught by Nio Killingsworth. And then Tony moved to Atlanta and worked at the Neighborhood Arts Center and taught script writing and writing at the Neighborhood Arts Center in Atlanta. This is something that Maynard Jackson, who was the first black mayor of Atlanta, had set up with something called CETA funds. This was the federal money. It's kind of the 1970s, 80s version of the Works Progress Administration, which was something that Roosevelt did. So definitely had been thinking deeply and about community arts as a form. So at that time, Tony, joined us at Scribe, and really began thinking about modes of that would allow people to give themselves permission to create the work. So the first projects that we did was a project called Community Visions, and the idea was people will get involved in media production if the work is useful to them. It's not so much about them paying to do it, but if they say, hey, we have a particular issue that we're trying to address, and at that time, not so dissimilar to today, issues of housing and homelessness and houselessness were major issues. This would have been the late 1980s, early 1990s. And there were actually organizations forming in Philadelphia, the National Union of the Homeless. There's Sister Mary Scullion, and I'm forgetting the name of. It's still a really thriving organization that has been addressing issues of housing and homelessness. And what would happen would be there'd be some action, let's say a takeover of a luxury high-rise that was being constructed, and it would be kind of a demo takeover, meaning that they wanted to take over the building to get news coverage to say that, look, you're building a luxury high-rise. Why isn't there housing for people who are unhoused? And so we would get these calls saying, "Are you the video guys? Would you come and videotape it?" And so we do it one time, and then you get like 3 or 4 calls a week. Now again, I've got a job, that I'm working at a TV station, and we realized like this is not sustainable. We're not going to be able to do this, but we know that these groups are doing mobilizations every 2 weeks, and they want video. So we need to figure out ways to train people to do this. Because documentary filmmaking is fundamentally, it's a literacy skill. It's how you communicate, and if the clearer you are that making a film, and you may be communicating with yourself, but generally speaking, it allows an individual to communicate with a broad public. So we began this program called Community Visions, where we would place 2 filmmakers for about a year with a community group, and over the course of that time would kind of develop skills and shoot and then have a videotape that would better enable them to reach their constituency. Anyway, so that model really kind of worked for us. Around, and I definitely see it in Ithaca, but around 2000, in Philadelphia, I dated with two things. One, the supposed end of the crack era, and the other kind of thing that was going on was suddenly development in poor neighborhoods because of racialized housing. What's called redlining. There are lots of neighborhoods that really were under-resourced and did not have people were did not have great housing. So that suddenly when and also they were because of redlining, they were not investment was not going into those neighborhoods. So when some of that changed, suddenly the system understands that, okay, this area with like underpriced housing and we can now capitalize it and make a lot of money. So suddenly there was this huge development boom. Good in many ways, but it also meant that there was a lot of instability in neighborhoods where people had lived for multiple generations. Suddenly, real estate prices went up. Sometimes families may have lived in a neighborhood for multiple generations, but they were renters and they didn't really own the homes. Also, like in Philadelphia in particular, to make neighborhoods more attractive for developers, and the city wanted more developers because it would increase the tax revenues. There was a belief that something called a gape-tooth block was going to be unattractive to a developer. Meaning, like if you have a house of row homes, there are a lot of row homes in Philadelphia, and let's say one house or two houses are missing because they've been demolished, that's not going to be attractive to developers. So it would be better to just bulldoze the whole block, and then a developer can come and build, whatever new thing. Because renovating historic houses is more expensive than building from scratch. The other thing, and you definitely see it in college cities, Philadelphia is a college city, is that I guess the business plan for many universities change, or not that it was something entirely new, but realizing that real estate was a really important engine. And so in Philadelphia, there are two large universities. There's University of Pennsylvania and Temple University, and then there are a lot of Drexel, and there are also some suburban colleges. There are a lot of schools there. There was this buying up of land, which was part of the financial plans, and you see it. Ithaca, you see it in. Certainly, you see it at Harvard. You see it at MIT. Just buying up land as a way to, like if you go to like Kendall Square in Cambridge, huge. When I went to graduate school there, it was like factories and little small houses. Now it's like Google, Microsoft. Oftentimes, the land is still owned by MIT. But the buildings, they have 50-year or 100-year leases or whatever for that. Anyway, so all of this to say is that there was a lot of insecurity. There were a number of reasons. For me, in starting with any project, there usually are a number of converging forces to do it. I mean, because really, to change my momentum and start a new project, there's got to be a number of things that kind of point me in that direction. So so there was this housing insecurity. The other thing that was happening in 2000, and something that we forget, and I forget now, if we're in this, era, it's the beginning of a new millennium. That's a big deal. We're beginning a new millennium, and I think that gets erased. And so that became a motivator for us to think about, maybe this is a good time to do a kind of history now that we're in the beginning of a new millennium. So we began this another participatory community media project called the Precious Places Community History Project. And for this project, we, having learned from the earlier project, we put a filmmaker as a production facilitator with a community group. But this time, rather than having two filmmakers, we put a humanities scholar, and that could be an anthropologist, a historian, or a social scientist, or a historian, oral history, a folklorist, and what the filmmaking person would do. Their teaching was pretty clear in terms of the technical skills of how to use a camera, how to use microphones, how do you edit. And what the humanities scholar would do is really helping groups think about how do you turn, and the filmmaker helped with this too, but how do you translate an idea like that, I want to do a film about the most wonderful church on my street, and how do you translate that into a narrative? How do you think of that? How do you think in presenting that history? How do you craft that into a narrative? What sort of research do you need to do? How do you research community resources? What kind of archive might exist? Are there personal archives? Are there institutional archives? Are there commercial archives? How do you carry out an interview? Learned a lot from social scientists. Like how do you construct an interview in a way that allows you to draw the information you need, and also realizing that many of these films about neighborhoods might in fact be the only film or only history of that particular neighborhood. How do you fact check? Because if it's going to be shared, if it's going to be shared with other communities, if it's going to be perhaps broadcast, how do you fact check? And so they would work. The plan was to work with maybe over. I think we tried to do it over a shorter time. So I think maybe 6 to 8 months they would work on a piece. And so the pieces. There was a historic kind of, sometimes slightly nostalgic kind of side to these pieces. There also was a very contemporary life, way of looking at these works, and also again, a chance to think about the future, and think about what the vision of the people in that community had for the future, all kind of embodied in that space, in that place. I forgot something very important. So what the process for the community groups that would apply would be they would have to name some public space. It could be a park. It could be a cemetery. It could be whatever that holds the community's memory, and oftentimes it might be some entity that if you're not from the neighborhood, you have no idea or you don't even notice what it is. But if you're from that community, it means something to you. And so So you're basically empowering the community by kind of lifting up the history that's contained in that space. So so that was the idea of the Precious Places project, and I'm going to show and we made these. We work with the groups to try to make them short, and so they're like 8 to 10 minutes a piece. And the groups all initially say, no, we have to do like a 2-hour film. And you say, well, we start with the 8 to 10 minute piece, and then you can later do the 2-hour film. So I was going to show 2 pieces that one, anyway, they'll speak for themselves, but they're both about I guess they were done about two or 3 years ago.
Is this light good or should I bring it?
Maybe a little less light. All right, that's fine.
You start the documentary about boxing in Philadelphia. This has got to be the first stop.
You see that black boy over there running scared, his old man in the bottom. He done quit his 9 to 5.
Like everything is God inspired. Like it wasn't like nothing I planned. It wasn't no financial thing. I met James, Joe Frazier's gym. As time went on, James was an amateur. Then he became an outstanding amateur. Then he would go to the Nationals and win everything. And they boycotted the 80 Olympics, which he was more likely to win. I took him like a little brother. Their family took me as an older brother. All he did was play basketball, ran track, and boxed. He never got to live long enough to do no lot of bad things. So I get the gym open. Now I got to name it. So James, not too long, had died. So I talked to his mom and dad and asked him could I use his name, because I prayed on it. I came up with the idea to name it James Schuler Gym, and it just took off.
I remember Buster, saying neat. He used to call me neat. Neat. I'm gonna open up a gym, in honor of James. They were extremely, extremely close. And, I was like, Buster, I said, that's a great idea. He was like, yeah, I got it all, I got it all planned out neat. He was just speaking in just a manner that it was fulfilling to him.
We're located in West Philadelphia, right off of 42nd and Lancaster Avenue, not too far from Drexel and University of Penn. We've been open for 26 years now. My dad has been consistently a part of the gym for the entire 26 years. He's the life of the gym. He's the nucleus of the gym. He wanted to open a boxing gym to give the kids in the neighborhood something to do other than fight on the street. So he opened the gym to give the kids a place to have a purpose.
One day I just went to this fight and Mr. Buster was there. And he said, hey man, why you ain't coming to the gym? What you doing? Where you at? And I told him my situation, like, hey, I can't afford to come to the gym. Like, I don't live with my mom no more. He said, some little bit of money stopping you from coming to the gym? Don't worry about that money. Come to the gym, I'll take care of you. Don't worry about it. Next thing I knew, people was in here taking care of me. Mr. Bus made sure my gym dues was paid, but he also started training me as well. He took a liking to me. And he was giving me tokens, making sure I was able to get from here to there. I guess you could say I came in the gym just to learn how to fight and channel my spirit. And I left out with a father, family, and I learned a lot of life lessons and stuff. So he saved my life.
There was a time when I would go into Schuler Gym, and it was the most exciting place to go because it was packed with good fighters. And if they weren't just all the Schuler fighters, people would come in from other places and, for the sparring or for the work. And it was just the most vibrant, alive gym that I had ever seen. To me, it was the best boxing gym.
Because Bus used to come down, and I used to watch him. Like, these guys from Schulers, man, they got some kind of swag to them, And he used to come down, and Bus used to punch on all the little kids. My son, all the little kids loved him. My son grew up, and other kids grew up there learning respect, learning unity, and you traveling, going to different cities. In Schuler's gym, there's loyalty. My son is forever blessed being around guys like Bus and Brother Nazim and Brother Khalil. They raised him just like I raised him. It showed him how to be a man.
It wasn't until I got into a really toxic relationship, very violent, that I realized the importance of it, taking myself seriously and like knowing how to defend yourself. And then I ended up just falling in love with it. And so I searched best boxing gyms in Philly. And the first result was James Schuler Memorial Gym.
I've been boxing at James Schuler's gym since I was 11 years old. When I was coming up as a kid, I used to get bullied a lot and teased, picked on, get my money taken. I would fight back, but I would always get beat up. So one day my grandma told my mom that I needed to learn how to fight. So she brought me around the gym in 1994, and I made history from there. It changed my life for the better. You know what, coming in here with Percy Cusses and Jimmy Beecham was a great experience. I know, I didn't have a father figure in my life, so they taught me how to be a man very early, and they stayed on my behind.
He tells me repetition is the key to everything. So I don't care if you do it perfect the first time. I care that you keep at it, you do it enough times to do it correctly. And then you can add the power, then you can add the style, then everything that's icing on the cake. But you need to get the foundation first and take your time doing it.
One of the things I learned about my nervous energy from Mr. Bus is that it's good for me to be nervous because that means I'm humble enough to understand that it could be possible that it don't go my way. So I remember one of my first fights that I had with him, I come in there, you can see it, like I'm nervous, like I want to do good, I want to perform well. He like, what's up, you nervous? I'm like, yeah. He like, my man, like you ready? That means you ready, you nervous.
The things you eat, the friends you keep, and the time you sleep. These are the things that get a guy conditioned, keep their mind right. Like I like to eat raw food. We used to go back out to the Amish country and eat raw foods, raw vegetables. Coming up, my mom and them, I was eating pig feet, eating different kind of things that I didn't know wasn't good for me. So I read a book called Cooking with Mother Nature with Dick Gregory. I applied that to when I opened this gym. I applied that to the gym to show the kids and don't realize how important it is to take care of your body and to take care of you.
I'm a professional boxing sparring partner for many world champions. Bernard Hopkins, Andre Ward, Gennady Triple G Golovkin, Adonis Stevenson, Arthur Abraham. I mean, the list goes on. And you got fighters from all over the world, and they choose me because they know Percy Cusses train good fighters, and he makes sure they come and give them good work. Coming from West Philly. I done been to Tokyo, Japan, Poland, Russia, Canada, UK, Germany, all over the world just to be a sparring partner, and I get paid good money.
See, our gym, what's so unique about our gym, we got such good boxing here that I never had to go to other people's gyms to do no boxing. So it always comes to us. And that's how, that's one of the legacies. Everybody want to come and box out of James Schuler Gym.
It's a safe haven for many people. It's keeping a lot of people, young kids, off the streets. Not only are they learning how to box, but it's a family. What Buster has done has been a landmark for years to come. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that James would be just ecstatic.
When you get kids around this age,
Messing up is the best thing they do. They don't do anything better than messing up or more often. Our goal is to help these kids become good human beings, and if they haven't learned how to box, well, that's extra.
Number 5.
Watch something else, but let me just turn the light on for a second. And the one I was going to do is. Yeah, okay, that's good. All right. So a lot of the works are celebratory, but also a lot of the pieces are really dealing with loss, and but still have the potential for organizing, even after a very, very hard loss. Communities can figure out ways to kind of, what is our next step. I was going to show two kind of up pieces, and then before going to the loss, but you just get one up piece and then one. Now we'll go to the loss. So this. This piece is kind of self-explanatory, but it also has to do with something that's really real in terms of, again, universities, how they impact communities. And part of being a good institutional citizen is not just, you have jobs for people, but you also, the quality of life, the schools are thriving in that community. That the institution, that to me is a good sign. This is anyway. We'll watch this. This is Let me talk no more and let's just look at the piece. All right, and I'll.
Major funding for this program was provided by.
And the reason it has that funding is it's broadcast on the local public TV station.
Natural community of West Philadelphia.
That I had to tell about my community.
People are saying, I'm here, I'm alive, I exist.
I live up there. I live up there. I live up the street. I live right there.
up there.
Next stop, 40th Street.
This is a story of the people's townhomes, a legacy spanning 4 decades and several generations, binding together a community of residents and activists who sought, who still seek, to preserve a sanctuary that represents one coalescing instance of the dream of housing justice.
The townhomes was wonderful. It was a place that everybody wanted to be, as far as I'm concerned, because everybody that walked past or rode past, seeing the development there, people was putting in applications to move there with their children for a good start. And it was a good start for me. My kids was able to go out and play and be surrounded by the kids of the neighborhood.
And moved to the townhouses. It was a safe environment there because it was gated in. I didn't have to worry about my children. I didn't have to worry about being on a city block anymore. You know, I felt more safe when I got to the townhouses. And then I got to raise my kids without worrying about them all the time or worrying about me.
Like sometimes I'll be like, why you with that little kid? Like, she ain't your age, like, but it's not about that. That little kid is looking up to that big person. And that big person is helping that little kid and taking that kid's hand to teach them like, hey, you can do this. Let me teach you how to do that. Do this way. Don't do it this way because there's consequences of that. You know, these kids are literally teaching each other, and they're teaching each other in a healthy way because they're creating fun. So these little kids, when they look up, the younger ones, all they see is fun, fun, fun. So that give them a sense of happiness with inside and some type of groundedness and freeness. They give them the opportunity to speak on how they feel, you know?
Where's the community at? I'm like, y'all are stripping down houses to put up these, like y'all putting up, y'all not putting, nothing's being put up conducive for anybody in the community. And that's where you start to see when you don't build for the community disappears. Because when you start taking away from the community, then what's next? You go after the community itself. And that's really what's been done in the last 2 decades. Look what it's come down to. They put up all these buildings for the universities and for the people of the university. And then what goes down? The lesser stuff for the people that have already lived and served this community for multiple years and generations. You see that stuff start to disappear. First, you see the education start to go. Then the thriving businesses that people own start to go. And then you see the communities themselves go after that. They strip the communities down and then they take the communities away. And that's really what I've seen the last 20 years to know this was coming. And when it hit directly at us, I wanted to make a way to fight it. And fortunately for me, I was around some good people.
So, you know, the thing that is very beautiful to me about the Townhomes Fight is that it's resident-led, right? It's, you know, there are people like myself and a few other organizers who are a part of the core, you know, team, right? And then, of course, many hundreds of supporters. But we follow the lead of residents. And we've been extremely clear about that. And that is necessary with this kind of fight. Like, this is not something for outsiders to come helicopter into, right? And so I think, number one, being resident-led is a huge strength of this fight. Another thing is intergenerational. We have grandmothers, we have great-grandmothers, we have children who are part of this, we have people who are mothers, we have people who are caregivers. And so I've never been a part of an organizing space that had such deep intergenerational organizing.
The intentions of that building when Mr. Altman, the father, was to have alternative living. And he fought to keep it that way until he died. It was only when the son took over that that promise was gone, was no longer valid.
Hurt. Supposed to choose to fight if I need help. I gotta fight for myself first. Because we had to move, and all of a sudden it was quick.
I'm down for the college. I hoped and prayed that my children would have went to college, but they didn't. One of them did, but the other two didn't. So I love college. That's a good thing. But they just took so much from us, like living there. It just hurts. I really feel like crying a little bit right now, but we know we don't own the townhomes. They could be sold anytime, whatever. We don't have documentation saying we could live here forever, no. But it was our community. It was, I don't understand. If greed is that way, and if money is that way, I don't want it.
But yeah, I think the coming into consciousness was really just over the decades of working at Penn and seeing how much harm is done by a university that's this wealthy in the surrounding areas, and then kind of coming to a head in the summer of 2020 with all of the uprisings, and then learning about this really amazing community of, you know, several hundred multi-generational families who were about to lose their home. It was something that's happening in the backyard here at the university, and it just got to the point where I didn't feel like I could sit by and let this happen. So I just got more involved with the townhomes.
No, because I'm on a fixed income. And this area we were living so good here on fixed incomes. And then they said that they wasn't going to renew, you know, HUD's lease. So I know we had to go. Well, we had protests. We had, you know, with the council people. We were down City Hall. We really tried hard. A lot of people really tried hard, but it didn't materialize today.
Coming home, a feeling that never gets old, to come home to the townhomes. Where together, we formed a community of resistance, of determination, of recognizing that together we could, with our collective will, stand up to displacement. Where together we all declared, we ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, you know, Scribe is not unique. I mean, there are other media arts centers around the U.S. that are very much involved in the same kind of participatory community media work. And you know, talking with, you know, my peers and colleagues around the country, I realize that, you know, I feel very, very privileged to hear the voices of people, the articulate voices of people who are dealing with issues and the solutions that they come up with. And so I guess maybe about 2 or 3 conversations preceded this, but about 2 or 3 years ago, 4 media arts centers, Apple Shop in Whitesburg, Kentucky, NOVAC, which is New Orleans Video Access Center in New Orleans, and Visual Communications, which is in Los Angeles. It sort of began in the Asian American freedom struggles in the late 1970s. We sort of came together and thought, what if the voices of people who are creating participatory community media, what if we were able to land these voices in existing news platforms? And so we came up with this idea of let's take an issue, really as a pilot, we said, let's take an issue that we know is in the news. And so, obviously, housing and land are really important issues in all of these communities. And so we came up with the idea that we would all create sort of short kind of news pieces, 5 to 7 minutes, again, with this participatory approach where people who are involved in, who are directly affected by, whatever the issue is, would create a piece, and so that could then be part of a broader national discussion. Not to say that we don't also want professional journalists to do it, but or independent filmmakers to do it, but understanding that there's a particular power and logic that only happens when people who are directly affected by issues are able to tell that story. So we sort of came up with a kind of prototype, and I'm trying to remember the name, Primary Source. So we came up with this idea called Primary Source, and New Orleans did this wonderful piece about how home insurance rates, which are really through the roof, they've gone like 300%, have created housing instabilities for really across class, because everybody's insurance has increased, and so they made a piece about that. In Apple Shop, a young woman has been really documenting her family's really transitory housing that has to do with economics, it has to do with natural disasters, floods, fires, and that has gone through maybe 6 or 7 houses, 6 or 7 homes over the last 10 years. And none of the choices have been really things that she wanted to do. And then in LA, Visual Communications did a piece about the gentrification and sort of development pressures in Little Tokyo, looking at a restaurant that had been there for really since at the end of the internment, when people were able to move back into Los Angeles, that it basically has had to move because of sort of the development that's happening there. So Scribe did one really on the particular problems faced by, I shouldn't say Scribe. Scribe facilitated one with residents of senior housing, that because the particular problems that residents of senior housing face as these sort of equity firms sort of buy up senior assisted living and basically try to squeeze them for as much as they can. So I'm going to just show that as kind of a last piece. And I think I have it together. Hold on. So with the broadcasts, when they're broadcast on the local PBS station, we invite the filmmakers to come and talk about the process. So that's what this is. Okay.
In a beacon of hope that struggles are worth it.
Open here, it was just myself. I was the only server.
These are conditions you see in war.
That's people who want to live the American dream of equality.
This story is only one small section of one family's experience with houselessness.
Across this country, housing for elders or senior citizens is a very serious problem. Many senior citizens, many elders live on fixed incomes, whether Social Security or retirement or what have you. So they have a lot of difficulty finding affordable, adequate housing.
I moved here in 2011, September of 2011. And so I've never lived in this type of setting, but it was just mind-blowing that you treat people like this. You know, it's supposed to be affordable, decent, and but it's almost like you're trying to break people's spirit. That's what I see happening.
I live in a one-bedroom apartment that I love. I have a 55-inch TV on my wall, and I watch my Eagles. When I look out my window during the summer, I can see the fireworks from the parkway. I moved to Brit Shalom in March of 2017. At that time, things were really good. It was thriving. We had different ownership. When they lost their renter's license, they got so mad that they shut everything down.
Well, one thing I've seen is the fact that private equity groups will go and purchase residential property and will then turn it into a slumlord property. So in other words, they extract the value out of a property and they have residents continue to pay rent, but they don't make any building repairs. They don't even use that money to pay the utilities. And whatever happens to the residents is what happens to them.
It's just disturbing to see how certain groups of people just are treated like they're disposable.
I've seen extensive water damage in many units, even in common areas like the lobby. I've seen infestations, severe infestations in different people's apartments. I've seen electrical wires hanging out of people's ceilings in their apartment because the maintenance team is not available to come fix it for them. So I've seen a lot of residents suffer because of that. And no air conditioning, sometimes no heat in the winter. Elevators aren't working. So if someone has a medical emergency, EMTs can't get in the elevator to give that person help. They had the fire escape doors locked during a fire so that nobody could get out. This is the state that the previous owners left this building in. This is just the second floor alone. Take a good look at it. Take a good look.
Being a profit-driven capitalist society sees housing as a profit-making thing and not something that is truly a human right. If housing is indeed a human right, we should not have to have these battles about housing.
We went to court all summer long. A lot of our tenants went down to City Hall to fight for our right to stay here.
There were senior citizens and people with health challenges who lived in that building, but they were not just sitting there being senior citizens and having health challenges. They were organizing. They were trying to form a tenants association. They were trying to do a lot of things, but people didn't listen until it got that bad. And when it got that bad, somebody's life could have been in danger.
And I do believe that something has to change. I think that the people that they have involved in these board meetings and making major decisions, they need some help from people in the trenches.
I'm really hoping that more tenants in this city will join the Philadelphia Tenants Union, form a tenants association in their building, form a tenants association among tenants in various properties of a single landlord, so that we can really live with dignity and without fear of being evicted.
So that's what I've been doing in Philadelphia. All right, thanks. Right.
We're going to take some questions.
Sure, yeah.
I'd like to start by asking you one about, I think it's like a goal, mission question. Massiah has been talking to students while he's been here, and on the first day he went to the high school and talked to high school students. And I heard him say that, you know, one of the things that you invited students to do is to think about asking more open-ended questions and doing oral histories and indicating that doing an oral history is different from other kinds of interviews, and that you're getting someone's life story. Mm-hmm. And I've asked you this question in different ways since then, because I keep thinking I'm teaching a class on listening, and one of the things that strikes me about that is figuring out how to listen long enough, or be quiet yourself long enough, or ask a right question. And so these are the things that are in my head, but how do you describe for someone else what to listen for, or how to open up that door for that kind of longer conversation?
There are a couple of oral history or oral historians that have had a really big impact on my thinking, and have definitely offered guidance on it. One person who I kind of consider the dean of oral historians in terms of technique and really thinking through methodologies that can allow people to give full, life stories, life histories, is Mary Marshall Clark, who now retired but headed the oral history program at Columbia, and has done really important oral histories around survivors of torture at Abu Ghraib prison, to with artists, for museums, but really, and most importantly, she's trained at least 2 generations of oral historians. Just a really, really extraordinary person and thinker and writer. Training in oral history is not. I've learned is one lecture is great, but it really is something that happens. It takes time. It's a process. It is very, very deep listening, And it also is very deep research. One thing, we have a youth oral history project at Scribe where high school students and college students interview elders. And in order for it to be a useful interview, they've got to spend a fair amount of time, because we're talking generation, we're talking people born in this century, interviewing people who were born maybe the early middle of of last century, and so things that seem like yesterday to someone my age or older is the Punic Wars. It's like really a long time ago. So having some sense of the official story, and also knowing something about. I think the more oral histories that a person does, they also will have some sense of context of a person's life based on who that person is. So realizing that you have to have an awareness of the social placement of the individual you're interviewing. It's more than you have that the person is Asian American, but more specifically that person is from Thailand, that person is female, or that person is what all of those things actually are really important in terms of how somebody moves through life. So. And I think some of that comes from conversations and doing the work. I think also oral histories like CBS News are not neutral. I mean, the oral history conductor has a position. If any of you have listened to any of the oral histories of people who were enslaved, the questions of well-meaning, interviewers. These were oral histories that were done during the Works Progress administration in the 1930s. I'm really, really glad that they exist, but the questions say a lot about who the interviewer was and what their interest is. So I think it's really important that whoever is conducting the interview have some self-awareness of their social, their class, their background, who they are in doing the work. So anyway, Mary Marshall Clark. In Philadelphia, there's he's a historian at Westchester University named Charles Hardy. Actually, there were a couple of people, more than four. Charles Hardy and Dr. Diane Turner. Dr. Diane Turner is now the head of the Charles L. Blockson collection at Temple, which is a collection of black books and memorabilia. Did this for their PhD dissertation, separate dissertations. Both looked at the Great Migration, and as a result of that, they sort of entered the world of oral history, and I've learned a lot about methodology just in terms of listening and watching oral histories that they've done and their strategies. It's also realizing that the technology that you use is really important in terms of the oral history. And one person who taught oral history at Scribe, our first oral history instructor, was a woman named Vertime Grosvenor,
yes.
She's extraordinary, and maybe it's like not how you're supposedly taught to do oral history, because she always adds in half of her own life too. So they're very long oral histories because she's going to share. But they're actually really quite good, because that sharing makes it more of a mutual sort of thing. And she is listening. She's not just talking, but there's a kind of reciprocation. So it feels like a conversation. Yeah.
I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to spend all week with you, so I'm going to open it up to other people. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much for that wonderful keynote. Beautiful examples, made me tear up, so thank you. And I wanted to ask you to talk a bit about the relationship between participation and preservation, and also the way that, of course, functions in the community, but also the meaningfulness of documentation and where these stories get stored. As a person who writes and thinks of film and film's long history of being lost, and then questions of preservation, digitality, the ephemeral nature, what you're doing is, and what you're encouraging others, or what you all, everybody's doing, is really beautiful, because it feels like preservation in a particular way, but I wondered how do you talk to the participants about this relationship between their participation and this kind of deep archival work, in creating an archival body of work through their participation?
Great, big question and a lot of work that we're definitely thinking about and working on. So. Scribe Video Center is a relatively small staff. It's like about 11 people, and there's a tech director that used to be a part-time position that we kind of figured out, finagled how we could make it that it really was a full-time position, and a lot of that other part is being the archivist, and again, knowing that archiving involves preservation, cataloging, metadata. If the archive is going to be useful to anyone, metadata becomes really important, and particularly as we get more into the digital realm. We lose the physicality. There's metadata in the physicality, but when it's like on a hard drive, how do you know what you have? So really thinking through that, and I would say that there's a community of community media archivists that have developed in Philadelphia and in many other places too, that are connected with religious institutions, that are connected with arts organizations, that are connected with Philadelphia was very late in getting public access, and so connected with public access, and so have really been thinking about best archival practices. Which seem to change, a lot. But anyway, but best for the time, and also because things change, also being prudent. I mean, there's certain things I learned from when film kind of was on its way out as being the predominant independent media form, and going to digital, to video, and then to digital media. Camille Billups, who's a filmmaker and artist, and also someone who had been recording many artists, said, I don't believe in video, I'm going to stick to film. And we all thought, okay, you're a dinosaur. But she was absolutely right in that yes, film does not last forever, but film actually lasts much longer than tape and much longer than digital media. I mean, digital media you have to transfer, and the failure rate for digital media, if not optimized, is significant. And also, there's something to the relative simplicity of film that allows it to last. So anyway, so part of it is, yes, we do digitize, and a lot of effort it goes into digitization, but we also, for what percentage of our archive is in analog and film materials, we also want to preserve the original as best we can. So it's more than a notion. It's a lot of work. Fortunately, I don't. Well, I guess I should, but I don't often praise foundations. But I really do think that Mellon right now is doing really, really important work, specifically targeting, looking at community media. They're looking at large institutions, but they're also looking at how can what is the support needed for smaller entities to preserve the work.
Mm. Some more questions?
I have two questions. One is actually about money. Thank you for your talk.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm really curious about what your relationship and like the community's relationship that you're working with is really like how are you thinking about money in terms of your relationship to foundations versus crowdsourced funding for your films? There's a film that's being circulated in my community that's going only community funding. But I've also been noticing that Mellon is reaching out to community organizations as well. The second question I had was just thinking about, I lost it. It'll come back to me. I'll ask you later. But the first one is about money.
Yeah, and that's a really important question. I would say that participatory community media, it's one, from my way of thinking, one does not get involved in this work if it's not compatible with the capitalist system. In that if community media was primarily there to be a commodity and make money, I cannot see how it could support communities. But it does have other power and other force, and that's why people are involved with it. I'm fortunate in that, I've been able to work and make work for the market. And I'm fortunate, and we are fortunate in this society that there is philanthropic support for the work. But I think that is, that's the reality. And if I think if one is thinking that community media, let's try to find the optimum business plan so that community media can support it, or participatory media can be supported by earned income. I don't think it's worth it, and I think people it's wrong-headed. It's wrong-headed. But the other side is, I can argue, I feel that I can argue persuasively that our society is better off with community media, with independent media. And half the time I can argue with funders and say, this is why it's important. And if you're donating money in order to build a better society, this is why you should support it. But it's not about it being a capital source.
I remember my second question.
Sure.
Okay, so
Can we come back to you?
Oh, sure.
Because there was some other question.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on your last comment. So your regular funding is through foundations, or how are you?
Similar. Sure. Yeah. For the work that we've been watching here, that has come primarily from foundations, private individuals, government. I believe in the National Endowment for the Arts. We were cut like everybody else, but I believe that tax dollars should go back to, I believe in that. I believe the state should support it, and the city should support it. And we do get funding from all three entities. It's not a majority of our budget, but it's significant. And I think there's a huge amount of sweat equity that goes into the work. Like community groups involved in the Precious Places, they're not being paid to make that work, but they're doing it because it's in their interest, and that's part of the work in terms of recruiting groups. So really talk with them and see, how is a documentary about this boxing gym going to be in your interest, or how is a documentary about University City townhomes, how is that going to be in your interest? And usually it doesn't take a whole lot of explaining. People understand. Yeah, we can use this for this. Yeah.
So the question is not just how does it get funded, but how does it get made? It involves more than the money.
Yeah, more than the money. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely more than the money. A lot of the equipment we have is donated, or equipment, or we try to be current, but when it's donated, it tends to be a little bit older, but it is current.
Bree.
Thank you so much for this fabulous talk. This was wonderful, and for letting us get a glimpse into these different communities. I'm really interested in the role of interdisciplinarity, both in your own life and then in the Precious Places Project. How you move from physics to filmmaking. You talked a little bit about how these projects involved, you moved from having two filmmakers primarily to one filmmaker and a humanities scholar, and that these people came from ranging backgrounds, some in history maybe, or anthropology, and that the social scientist offered something in terms of interviewing. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to what kinds of interdisciplinary strengths you saw born out of those connections, what kinds of questions were asked differently based on the background of the researchers. Just kind of how you saw it interacting in the work.
Just thinking about the interdisciplinary influence in terms of the work and really the projects of Scribe. One of the projects that we launched at Scribe is this project called Muslim Voices of Philadelphia. And it came about because one of the humanities facilitators was in the anthropology department at Haverford College. She was actually the chair of the anthropology department. Her husband is from Iran, and she's from Iowa, or I don't mean to turn all the middle of the country, Iowa or Nebraska, someplace like that. I shouldn't say that, we're being recorded. But she's from the heartland of this continent. And she noticed, she was saying, like, what is this with Philadelphia? There's so many Muslims. And I know, because I'm born, in Philadelphia. I don't know, what are you talking about? And she's like, yeah, I mean, there's Muslim style. I mean, and large number of African American Muslims, and it never really occurred to me. And then I realized, oh yeah, my cousin's Muslim. Yeah, but it's just not you don't notice it. And part of it again is she's noticing it after 9/11, where there is this huge amount of Islamophobia, but somehow or other people in Philadelphia are just going about doing their business, and so as a result of her noticing, we realized that the utility of a project focusing on Muslims in Philadelphia was really a form of protection. These are Muslim communities that go back. If you look at their roots, they're over a century old. There were Muslims in Philadelphia that go back to the 18th century, that we know of, to the 18th century, and probably prior to that. And so the idea was to look at the vast array of not only Muslim communities, but Muslim-inspired communities. So from the Moorish Science Temple, there's a large Ahmadiyya group in Philadelphia. There's Sufi Muslims in Philadelphia. We looked at the University of Pennsylvania has one of the oldest, I think the second oldest MSAs, Muslim Student Associations. So, and the idea was to look at just variety of Muslim groups, and to say that this is very much part of Philadelphia's history. So I think that, I'm from the people that come in and out of the door, they influence. I mean, the second person that worked at Scribe was a dancer, and so dance is oftentimes showing up in projects and themes that we do, looking at dance culture in Philadelphia. It's when we ask for someone to work with us for their specific skills, they usually have other things that they bring other things to the process, and which is very important. And then your question about so my background from Cornell to filmmaking, I think I had gotten a job really the bottom of the barrel right after graduating as a writer at the public television station in New York. And one of the things that I did was I was writing like science news pieces, sort of like interstitials between programs. And I think my boss was really trying to, like, this kid is just studying astronomy, and he's writing station breaks for Sesame Street. Let's create some space for him to do this. So I did that, but then I really wanted to think deeply about how visual media could be used to express complex ideas. So that's what led me to. I had to explain Ilya Prigoghine's law, who works with the second law of thermodynamics and dissipation theory, in 30 seconds. He gets a Nobel Prize. I have to explain it in 30 seconds to a television audience. So I'm thinking, there's got to be a visual way there's got to be a visual language, because I can't do it with like differential equations. That's not going to fly. So the idea of going to film school was really like, okay, there's got to be, is there is there a visual language? What is the visual language to explain complex ideas? And at that time, there was this art historian, a guy named Rudolf Arnheim. I don't know if nobody's ever heard of him. Oh, okay, Sabine. And his books are indecipherable, but I carried them around like the Bible, and trying to see if I could decode this visual language. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So. Thank you.
Sure.
One last question here. Yes.
Hi. Toward the beginning, you said that people would ask you, "Are you the video guys?" And then you would couldn't really show up. And I'm just wondering about how you became known as a community media center, and how people knew that they could access you, or that there was that potential, and then how you kind of got busy enough to start hiring and actually have this really vibrant center.
It really did not happen overnight. And it really was not necessarily a business plan or work plan. In 5 years no, it didn't really work that way. Fortunately, I knew nothing about nonprofits or boards and I didn't think I needed to know anything about it. But there were people around me that might mention something like offhandedly, like as I mentioned, Philadelphia did not really have a media arts center, and because there are media arts centers in other parts of the country, Philadelphia did not have a media arts center. And when someone who I sort of talked to casually about this, a guy named Gary Smalls, this kind of cultural impresario without portfolio. But you didn't realize he was giving you guidance and instruction because he said things so offhandedly. He would say, well, there's the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, well, if you write a proposal, and so, we got like a grant for $750 to print brochures. And and then somebody else who was really active in boards in New York said, you really should form a 501c3. A what? And so you create a nonprofit organization, which means you have to have a board. So, but it really was not a plan, and necessity and utility are the mothers and fathers of invention. And Great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. And I still believe in paper, even though I'm digital. So I have some. If anybody wants some brochures from Scribe to learn more about our work.
Yes. Thank you so much. Every time I talk to you, I learn something new, and I just had the sense watching this today, watching the film yesterday, and your participation in class.